Fast Forward Productions. The women are speaking.
Everybody, welcome back to the Unfiltered Entrepreneur. I'm Ashley Pollard, and I am here with one of my favorite accounts to follow, which is Smarter in a Sec. We have Julia here. Julia, thank you for joining me today.
You are so welcome. I've followed you for a while as well, and really excited to sit down and chat.
You know, it's interesting because right before you guys tuned in, we were chatting about different ways that we could take these different topics and different conversations. And Julia, for those of us who don't know you, I want to give you an intro, but guys, I also think it's interesting to speak to people who are in corporate with maybe a side business or who are juggling multiple things. I know a lot of us are running multiple businesses, or maybe you guys are moms with kids and a business. So it's always nice to have people on the podcast who are just as busy as you are so that we can hear a little bit about balancing all of it. But Julia, could you give us a little bit of an intro to you?
Absolutely. So my name is Julia. I live on the Upper East Side of New York City, though I went to NYU and have lived here for many years. I have a background in strategy consulting, went to NYU for undergrad, Kellogg for business school, and then lived and worked in Shanghai and Hong Kong for a year. And like many others, 2020 was a watershed year and decided to start creating content. And I am a material girl like the rest of us, but I'm also very nerdy. And I felt there wasn't a content creator who shared smart content as well as product recommendations. So I like to tackle the deep stuff and the light stuff. I share a lot of book recommendations, podcast recommendations. I like to say I'm a varsity reader and also a varsity shopper. Those are really the two pillars. Varsity reader, shopper, and eater are my three varsities because I was not a varsity athlete growing up.
I'd say I'm not a varsity reader, but I would like to think I'm a varsity shopper. That is for sure.
We all can get our varsity letters in so many ways. Since I was in high school, my parents' friends would come to me and say, "Can you read this work email? I need your help telling this story." Combining my experience as a natural writer and storyteller with my business expertise, I now partner with women across industries as well as men to sharpen their personal story, to make major career changes, and also generally personal branding, someone who's an executive who wants to start creating content and become a thought leader in their industry. I touch personal brand in all facets, whether that's career or content.
Well, and I think what's really valuable there is that sometimes you have the person who is the aggressive, I'm going to rise through the ranks and read the room and ask for the high raise and make shifts to different businesses to extend my career, to go quicker than my colleagues. And then there's others who that's frightening, or who don't know how to talk about themselves and who don't know how to ask for what they deserve. And it's so funny because although we're talking about that in maybe like a career, professional, like corporate level potentially, that so applies with entrepreneurship, where we also maybe don't know how to ask for money or tell our story, or, you know, what do we share? What do we hide? So I think it's valuable really across entrepreneurship as well. I'm sure you would agree. And I'm curious, like, for those people who do have a hard time kind of talking about themselves, what are some basic tips that you generally can provide for people?
Talking about yourself and being loud, it is not narcissistic. It is table stakes for success in any industry. You are the driver of your own career. Whether you're a solopreneur, whether you're a corporate executive, you need to be loud about what you want. Now, I'm not suggesting if anyone's listening who just graduated from college, you're going to march in and ask for a promotion on the first day. That's balanced with a track record of success and accomplishments in your specific field. But I encourage everyone to think like a frat bro. That is
this is we're immediately going to be best friends. Literally, I was telling her, guys, because this is the first time we've met. I was telling her, Julia, before we started with you about Cocky Ventures. But what I didn't tell you, Julia, is that the tagline's actually "Be as cocky as a white guy."
Love that.
We're aligned. Further, yeah.
Love that. And yes, that is so true. But I find that so many women are afraid. And that extends across all areas. They're afraid to put themselves out there on social media. They have a great business idea. They have a great content idea. They're afraid to make that career jump. They're afraid to reach out to that contact of theirs and make an ask. What's the worst thing that's going to happen? You're never going to know if you don't try. And obviously that's when the personal brand comes in. That's where the resume is super important. That's where your elevator pitch is super important, because I get so many messages on LinkedIn. Anyone who is in a corporate executive role will receive dozens of LinkedIn messages a week that are straight up asking for a job. And that's not what this is. There's a way to be loud about your accomplishments, but also couch that with curiosity and humility.
I think that what's interesting is that I tend to find that women have the big idea, people are going to love this, I'm going to go for it. And then it gets to the content piece, and where they get tripped up is, what are the precise words I say? Or what if my background isn't perfectly put together? Or what if I have a hair out of place? Or what if I stumble over my words? Do you have any sort of like pieces of encouragement for people who kind of run up against like those minutia perfection moments that can maybe stifle someone in sharing those really great moments?
Absolutely. So content is an extension of you, and you want to make sure that it's authentic to you. So yes, I do see so many women get tripped up, but I think you learn by doing. And I recently archived some of my earliest posts because my nose was literally pressing the glass of my phone. I didn't have a phone stand. I sounded so robotic on camera. It's a complete learning curve. And when I first started doing posts on Instagram, TikTok, it took me an hour or more to do, a single post, because I just wasn't used to the mechanics simply of the app, even though I'm addicted to my phone. So just know that it's going to take time, not only to learn the mechanics of creating content, but also to get in a rhythm. It's like if you work out every day, or if you eat something for lunch every day, or you have a specific morning walk routine. Now I can't think of not posting on social every day. It's constantly in the back of my mind. What am I thinking about? What am I posting? But that muscle took a long time to build. When I first started, it was hard. It was more of an active thought. And now it's active, but it's more passive because I built that muscle. So recognize that it is going to take personal growth to get there, but that just takes time.
Yeah, it's almost like, how do we learn to walk? We don't just walk, right? You have to be
right.
You have to crawl, you have to slip, you have to, you have to get there, right? You have to fall off the bike. Learning by doing is such a great way to put it. We have a tagline here at The Doers that is, it's not hard, it's new. And the idea there is that, like, of course it's hard to be that vulnerable, but at the end of the day, hard kind of tells your brain, I can't do this. And new is, this is hard and I'll get it. So that phrase that we've kind of like trademarked here is this catchphrase that is, learn by doing. That's in essence what we're saying. It's interesting because another thing that we kind of went back and forth on, you and I prior to joining, was, what do we share in content? How much is too much? Where is that balance? And I'm somebody who I'm like, please sell your services. And I know that there's also a flip side that you like to share about balance. And so I kind of want to talk about that a little bit, about like where I'm taking the stance of like, don't be scared to sell. I know that you also have a bit of a perspective where it's like, correct, and here's a way to kind of like balance your content. So tell me a little bit about like what that could look like, or maybe what that looks like in action.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of my business, as I mentioned, I do career coaching, I do personal brand, and then I also do marketing consulting as well for brands. And that was always a thread throughout my life. And once I started creating content on social media, that wasn't a thread that I incorporated in my content. I just thought, why would people trust me on the internet to provide these services? Mm-hmm. And I was just tapping my offline referral networks. Yeah. But I think what I realized is that people really trusted my perspective, and I am really great at what I do. So if there's a way to provide thought leadership and advice to people, mm-hmm. and build trust to potential buyers, that's much more of an authentic tactic for me versus being someone who is constantly click this link and there's a paywalled course, or, just be very shilly about it. I do AMAs every week about career topics that people really like and respond to, because I know that not everyone who follows me is going to be able to afford my services. And my goal as a content creator is to provide value. And sometimes I'm compensated for that value in terms of affiliate links and brand partnerships and like that. But mainly, I'm doing that because I love sharing career advice, and it's something that I'm so passionate about, but also building the runway of trust. I've gotten on the phone with clients who say, yeah, I followed you for a long time, and when I reached this nexus in my career, I didn't think of hiring anyone else. So building that trust takes time. But I think if you have a particular passion, you can create content around that that's authentic, but also share little snippets of what you do and just link to your website. Sometimes I'll do 4 slides. Here's free advice. And then FYI, I also do this professionally. You can engage with me and work with me. So that's a tactic. Think of it as a long-term relationship play versus what am I squeezing out of my audience today.
And if you were actually to really take a look at what she just said, guys, Julia's feedback here is in essence going back to that funnel of bring people in some sort of acquisition type of content, get them hooked, get them excited, get them interested in seeing more. And then when they're there, give them something to sense your expertise, give them some free opportunity to really engage with you so that when/if they're interested in hiring, they've seen you in action in some capacity. And I think that what you're saying, the value point is just so important, because while skipping just to buy, shop, not Justin Timberlake, buy, but shop, just like hire me. Skipping straight to that, we miss a very important nurture connection point, which is where people really validate trust and authority and legitimacy. So I think there's definitely something to be said there about making sure that there's a bit of balance between the two. I really appreciate that point of view, especially because I think that one thing we had spoken about as well is this personal brand aspect. And I know that I get a ton of questions, and maybe you do too, about I don't want to share a ton of my personal life. Am I required to? Or how do I share without making people uncomfortable or making myself uncomfortable? And my answer has always been, I have limits. I have a personal rule that I will never share any of my romantic life on social media. There's people in my family who wish to not be shown. I fully respect that, of course. And outside of that, I kind of just go by vibes. But I'm curious, do you run up against that? Where is the line? Am I required to share? Am I required to give everything away? Is that part of this and I have to suck it up? Or is there a way that I can share authentically while hiding some things? I'm curious your perspective on that.
Absolutely. So it's something that I've grown into. When I first started creating content, I didn't show my face at all.
Right.
I love wit. I love a good laugh. So I would post stuff and people would say, you should show your face because I feel like I want to connect with you and know more about you.
Yep.
So slowly I started sharing more about me. I would go on stories and I talk. Am I sharing very detailed things about my personal life? Sometimes I am. I'm very open about the fact that my first boyfriend was when I was 27 because my metric for finding a partner was, would I rather be alone or watch Netflix? That's advice that every person dating should have.
Yeah. That's
so
a really funny way to view it.
Because the person should enhance you, or else just go home and watch TV and have a great night by yourself. So I'm very open about that. But there are certain things, and for instance, my brother and I are very close. He always makes fun of me, and I screenshot his funny comments and put them on stories, and people always really enjoy that. And I show aspects of my family as well. But am I certainly going to talk about the fact that, my parents were divorced recently, even though that would be really interesting? No, that's just something that my parents would not be comfortable with.
Sure.
There are certain boundaries. That's not my story to tell. So there are certain things that if it feels authentic and natural, I'll share. But I always share with the perspective of adding value and evoking emotion. So if I'm sharing something personal is that going to better someone else or make them laugh or inspire them? So I think that is the line with which you could think about personal content, because I do see a lot of content creators, and I'm sure you see this too, who are just kind of complaining about things on social media, and that's not entertaining, that's not empowering, that's not interesting, that's not inspiring. So
Yeah, it's are you sharing the lesson or the wound? For instance, I recently had an experience where I was personally invited. I should have seen the red flags a mile away. Personally invited to this business council of highly vetted business individuals. We want to have our interview with you so that we can formally introduce you to the team. Oh my gosh, it's a great name. I was so honored. Come to find out, dues are $6,000. I'm like, okay, I got swindled, right?
oh,
And so I didn't pay it. I'm not paying it. I was like, this is not for me. To each their own. I think an example of that could have been me going online and being angry and upset about it, which I was, and I did share. However, I also took the approach of like, here are things that I noticed. I'm going to tell you the red flags that I had. I'm also going to tell you the questions that I asked that were tough questions, because I did feel a little bit bait and switched a bit, right? A little bit swindled, a little bamboozled. So if you're in this situation, kind of trust your gut a bit. Here's questions you can ask. So it's like sharing an experience, but also saying like, here's learnings. Here are things that you can take away. So I think that's also a pretty decent, like a pretty strong rule. I appreciate that. And then also like, for the people who are really private, is there a requirement to be super open and open the doors to their personal life? Is that something that's required of a personal brand?
I would say that vulnerability sells.
Sure.
No one wants the super buttoned up brand. I think the 2013, 2014, 2015 Instagram influencer who was just posting the frilly outfits and didn't really share much about who they were or what they stood for, that's not really driving clicks. People want a connection with who they follow on social media. And everyone has something that they're passionate about. Again, this isn't a hard and fast rule, but there are content creators who don't really share much about their personal lives, who are massive. But what they do get vulnerable on is that one pillar of their content, whether that's cooking, whether that's failures that they've had business-wise. So that sense of vulnerability doesn't necessarily have to come from your personal life, but it should come through something else that you're talking about.
Right. Yeah, having a little bit more of a story there.
Right.
Something that kind of also leads me to is being confident about how you're portraying yourself, really taking ownership. I try to tell people is like actively make the decision. I think it's one thing to say, shoot, I talked about something I didn't want to, or like, I could have talked about that, but I didn't know I could. By actively making a decision and saying, I will speak about this, I won't speak about this, it gives you a little bit of empowerment, I find. But that active participation in your decisions, I find also relates to how you represent yourself in all matters that relate to your brand, specifically in offer pricing and how you construct your offers and how you sell your offers and how you position yourself. You recently shared that you had an experience about kind of pricing yourself against someone else. Is that something you'd be open to talking about?
So I recently had an experience where someone came to me and said, I worked with another career coach and I was super unhappy with the materials that I received.
Yeah.
And I saw the materials and I was shocked at the state of those materials. And I asked her what she paid for them. It was an extremely high price that I was also shocked at. And so I worked with her. I gave her a discount. As I said, you're just out of Catholic guilt. I feel bad that you worked with this other person and you didn't get the experience. So I'm going to give you a discount and also, over deliver on what I promised. And so experiences like that really get you thinking about price and what your value is. Something that I have started is, and I recommend to any solopreneur, is asking clients, what do you think of my pricing? Do you feel that at the end of the engagement, do you feel that the experience reflected the price and do you feel like it was more? And what I've been hearing from clients more and more is, yeah, I would have paid more for your services. So that has compelled me to take that positive feedback and raise pricing accordingly.
Sure. We actually encourage to do that at time of like asking for a testimonial. I've had conversations around like when, and I say, if you were to send a testimonial form or a request for a testimonial, you can also ask for these levels of feedback. And also positioning the question in a certain way will give you a better answer or a more well-developed answer from someone. So for instance, was this too expensive? May not be the right question. Instead, and that's just a question that I've seen before in a forum, not that you had said that. Instead, what would it look like to say, I'm considering taking a look at and auditing my pricing. Would you say that you, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being I did not get what I expected, 10 being I got more than I expected, where is it like expectation versus price that you paid? That's a great way to do it for those of you listening and we're looking for some actionable advice. And then on top of that, I also think it's helpful to say, I'm thinking about raising my rates. Is there anything I should include, or do you think that this is substantial? So more to think on there, because your point is so valid that the Catholic Guild could not agree more. The times I've been there, I mean, people come to me and they say, I hired this coach and I paid her $25,000 and they still don't have a product suite. And I'm like, oh my God, get in here. we have to talk. Like I hired, I need to help you out here. That is so real. I'm sure many, many people feel that. But I also think that there is something to be said about properly vetting people to make sure that they understand what they're buying, making sure that they're not spending out of fear, giving people time to make the decision, giving people a rest period so that they don't feel rushed into a decision. That way you don't become the sob story that they have to tell to the next person, which I know you're not doing, Julia. This is more to the listeners.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that what I tell everyone is if you are hiring someone for any service, but specifically for personal brand, and there's material deliverables. I'm not saying to do this for like your plumber, for instance, but so many clients who I end up working with say, you were the only person who offered to connect me with a previous client, who sent me work samples, and who sent me a detailed list of how you would provide value in this engagement. And so if you are able to do that, you're going to set yourself apart. And I recently had a conversation with my friend Muna. I'm going to share her Instagram because she is an amazing follow. And I'll share it in the notes. But she said to me that when I shared the experience that I had with the other coach, kind of gypping my client, she said that person's business might only last for 18 months. She has this theory that people who are consistently producing mediocre work, at some point that's going to dry up. So know that if you are delivering value and you're consistently delivering client success, that other person's business is going to dry up.
Yeah, it's so true. And I also think there is such a thing as like getting a short-term win and getting a long-term win. It's a cheap buck to be able to under deliver at a high rate. That house doesn't stay standing. That is not the brick house that stands forever and ever and ever. I would much rather have a structurally sound foundation that we're building, some wobbly structure that isn't actually going to be utilized for long. So, thinking really like long-term gains is the move here.
Exactly.
What are the different trends that you notice in your career consulting, career coaching? What are some trends that you notice specifically with women that tend to come up frequently?
Absolutely. I'm first going to plug my friend Muna. Her Instagram is mkedi.co.
Okay.
She is a fantastic brand marketer and shares great thought leadership content. So highly recommend following her. In terms of career coaching, one trend that I see is thought leadership. Mm-hmm. And if someone is job searching, you can't control the amount of jobs that are posted, but you can control your relationships.
Sure.
And when you think about it that way, your mindset opens and you feel much more in control of this nebulous, stressful process. And what I recommend to everyone, whether they're a solopreneur or whether they're trying to re-enter the workforce and maybe they were an at-home parent for some time, or whether they're a senior executive, thought leadership is the new currency. And if you have something to say, LinkedIn in 2024 is like Instagram in 2014. There is so much crap out there, and there's so few posts that deliver value that if you are sharing something of value, it's going to get a lot of eyeballs. So I work with a lot of people on LinkedIn thought leadership content. And one client of mine, she is amazing. Her name is Anu Khat. She is the first Indian woman in the US, the first Indian American woman to open a cannabis dispensary. So she has a super interesting story, and also just the cultural taboos of being a woman of color in cannabis. She had a really interesting story to share. And I partnered with her on some thought leadership content on LinkedIn, which I continue to do. And she's gotten consulting opportunities. She's gotten podcasts. She has been invited on podcasts and many other wins simply from putting her name out there. So that's just an example. And yes, she does already have an existing personal story, so to speak. But even if you are 3 years, 4 years into an industry, you have something to say. Write up a compelling post and put it out there, because you are branding yourself as the XYZ expert.
It's so true. And also, I think it seems simple, and in practice can be so vulnerable, because you're in essence saying, like, this is my perspective and I know best, and it kind of gets to the point where maybe people are going to disagree, or maybe people are going to come up against you. And I think that that's such a standard part of it. I think that's such a normal aspect of the thought leadership space. You're almost allowing disagreement because you're cementing yourself in an opinion, which is almost inviting, criticism. And that can be really tough for people.
But I think criticism goes hand in hand with vulnerability. That drives clicks, and that drives engagement. So some of my most highly engaged pieces of content have been about things that are potentially controversial. So I posted something earlier in the week about 5 rights women have never had, and rights that women only had starting in, the 1970s. Women could only get a small business loan in their own name in the 1980s. That is wild. I believe it was 1980. And of course, that reached the wrong side of Instagram, and they got so many hateful comments, but that only drove that piece of content further. And I kind of knew that when I posted it. So think of something that's potentially a hot take, and potentially something that is going to spark fire in a lot of people. And that is the key.
I agree. I think that in the world of thought leadership, you're almost welcoming it. Something that I like to say that I could cement myself into is that the world would be a better place with more female entrepreneurs, or female in higher up spaces in business. I think women in business is good for the world. I do. I genuinely do. And that is something that can welcome criticism from the people who say that's not soft feminism, or what about femininity, or what about, how homemaking. And obviously I'm not saying don't stay at home with your kids, right? Like, the important part here is choice. But, having this opinion, this strong opinion that I want women to feel empowered to be in the workplace, however that looks, will invite people saying, no, but XYZ. And to your point, that conversation is what propels the personal brand. It's what propels the thought leadership, because there can be conversation, exactly. There can be maybe friendly debate, there can be potential like organic press opportunities, depending on the opinion, that in the way that it gets bubbled up. And I think a lot of this kind of hinges on being opinionated about something you genuinely are, really staking your claim in something that you will double down on, because it could get traction, and that is the goal. Do you agree?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And everyone has those things that they're passionate about. And there are so many bifurcated opinions throughout those pillars. So you can find controversy in gardening.
Yes.
You can find, yes, in any topic, you can find that level of being provocative, being vulnerable, being authentic.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be rude. It doesn't have to be fringe. Gardening is such a funny example. It's true, because have friends that garden, and there's chatter around greenhouse or no greenhouse or keeping bugs away and how to do so. And do you involve this, or how do you plant that? It's like, it's so funny. So the opinion doesn't have to be rude or condescending or fringe. It can simply be, I do think this is something I want to stand on,
Yeah. And I think to your point about women being afraid, I think that there's a lot of dominant narratives about there's too many content creators. There's that meme, we don't need more content creators, we need plumbers. Right. Which is true. We do need plumbers.
Yeah. We'll think
people are going into the trades. Yeah, exactly. Or be a plumbing content creator, truly. But in all honesty, no matter what space you're in, you are the person who has unique and individual insight. And so I met so many creators in my space of career development, lifestyle, sharing product recommendations, and they're all fantastic women who are all close friends of mine. And we all talk about similar topics, but we differ also in so many ways. So don't be fearful that your space is saturated, because no one has ever said there's too many lawyers, there's too many bankers, there's too many accountants. You can forge your own path.
I also tend to believe that seeing saturation is actually validation, to be completely honest. The reason I say that is because I want to be in a space that people are discussing. I want to be in a space where there's questions. I want to be in a space where people are actively searching out answers. Too far away from that is maybe too niche. I tell a story. I can't give the exact example because it's so niche you'd be able to find it. So I'm going to use a different example completely, but you'll get the point. We had a client come to us at Dial ZR Marketing who basically was like, I want to make a company. It's going to be blue jumpsuits for pregnant women who only go swimming in natural springs. It was so specific. And she was like, nobody's done this before. And I'm like, nobody wants that. Nobody's talking about the need for that product, And it was so challenging, because to go too far away from the chatter means that you're getting people who aren't even discussing the matter, period. So there has to be some level of saturation. Otherwise, the market fit is too low for this to even find success. I think that's so funny. Part of the conversation that I think people tend to miss. I'm empowered by saturation. I think that just means that my voice maybe hasn't been heard in that space yet, but, to each their own. Another thing I wanted to kind of talk about with you is that one piece of content that I've shared with my audience continues to resonate, especially in today's day and age, is what I call curation content. And it's not necessarily content where you're saying, I believe this, right? Or I'm selling this service. Both pieces of content we've discussed today, which I do think are important. I also see such a trend, and you do this very well, of curation. Here's podcasts you should be listening to. Here are articles I read this week. I read every article you put on your story, by the way. If you're like, I wonder who's reading these, Ashley Pollard is reading those articles. Okay. I'm loving them. And so it's such a great thing where if I'm like, I don't want to read a book right now, I do feel like reading something intellectually stimulating, I know that there's times I can head to your page and see what articles you're recommending that are maybe going to expand my worldview or challenge what I believe or educate me on a topic that I didn't know much about. And so there's a lot of this curation content going on. And I'm wondering, how has that helped you? And have you noticed that as well, to kind of bring a level of authority without having to actually create those articles or those pieces of content yourself?
I would say yes. I would say that that's something that's a natural extension of my passion as a varsity reader. And also my love language is sharing content with others. If you are a personal friend of mine, you will be spammed with TikToks, Instagrams, and articles all day. So for me to start sharing content, because my group texts of my friends and family were like, stop sending us articles. So I was like, I think there's people out there who would want to see this. But yes, I would say that it's been a nice way to become a thought leader in interesting content. And it's something that comes naturally to me. And it also allows me to get closer to my audience through analytics too. So even though I'm not directly creating the content, it's, okay, this post about people coffee badging that I posted yesterday, which is when people are required to go to the office, but they're just swiping it and then leaving, is a huge trend. And that got thousands of clicks. So that tells me that people want more content on that topic. So it's a good way to beta test, see from your audience what people want to hear about.
That's such a good point too, because in our business, we have a curated playlist of podcasts that we are listening to. I think there's only like one of my podcasts on there. Like it's not a push for my podcast. It's like ones that I'm like, this is fascinating. You have to listen to this. And I'm always adding to the playlist. I do love it because people will come to me. There's this one episode on the playlist. It's about Adidas versus Puma. Do you know that story, by the way?
No.
I'm
writing it down right now.
You have to, stuff I should know. Adidas versus Puma. It's a long listen, but it's one of the most fascinating business stories of all time. Guys, go listen to it. It's on our podcast playlist. But, things like that, I have these different things that I share on this podcast playlist. And it is very fascinating, the ones that people bring back to me. It's always the Adidas versus Puma. It's always Melanie Perkins, how I built this Canva. It's always this one episode about managing money and from the financial feminist. And so those kind of give me an insight into, to your point, what my audience is maybe intrigued by or empowered by. And so I can kind of lean a little bit more into those topics. Or I have an opportunity to share some of the other podcasts in the playlist to differentiate if they need something different to kind of take a listen to. So I do want to empower anyone who's listening to think about ways that you can also create a little bit of like a curation aspect, because to your point, Julia, like the beta testing of the topics is one of the best reasons to do it. I would think.
And it's also that we're always not camera ready all the time. And so it's a nice opportunity to share thought leadership and share value with your audience without physically going on camera.
Yeah, absolutely. What's a way that you can give to your audience while staying in bed or like with your hair on top of your head or with a face mask on or watching Love Island, Anyway, so all really great things. I had a few things I wanted to touch on with you, which we did. I really love this conversation. I could literally talk to you forever, Julia. I'll be in New York in a few weeks. I would love to see you and meet in person.
Yes, absolutely.
I'm moving back shortly, so I will also be in the city for good soon, which is very exciting. Julia, thank you so much for being so generous with your time.
You are so welcome. This is such a fun conversation.
I think that both of us kind of have this mission of like, you have like a little bit of like a YOLO energy around you without being chuggy. It's like, I'm going to share because I want to. And I have something interesting that I want to tell you, right? It's like you're bursting at the seams with information you want people to have. And it's palpable. You can so tell it's not forced. You can so tell that you love what you're doing when people are watching you on social. It's the most organic views of like, this person really loves what she's doing. It's so palpable and I have so much respect for it.
That's so sweet. And authenticity is really at the core of everything. And kind of my last final words to anyone who wants to go the social media route when they're promoting their business is it really is a long game. And Instagram and TikTok and even Substack, there's a lot of voices out there.
Totally.
And it's going to take time to build your tribe, build your community. Don't let uphill climbs stop you from taking that leap.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Julia, thank you again for coming on the podcast. To everybody listening, where can we find you? Where can we fall in love with you?
So you can follow me on Instagram and TikTok at Smarter in a Sec. I also have a Substack called Varsity Reader, which you can find at smarterinasec.substack.com. Then if you want to work with me one-to-one, my website is smarterinasec.com. Then you can always DM me on Instagram or email me at smarterinasec@gmail.com.
Beautiful. Julia, thank you again. And guys, we will see you next time on The Unfiltered Entrepreneur. Before we go, I'm inviting you on my mission to help female entrepreneurs, okay? I am a girl's girl, and I want to see every single one of you empowered, living your biggest and boldest life. And the easiest way for people to access free information and a community of like-minded women is by sharing this podcast. Leave a review on Apple, rate us on Spotify, but more than anything, if you liked this episode, please take a screenshot, share it to Instagram, and tag us so we know that you are loving loving the content, but also other people can see that you are an entrepreneur who is focused on her game. Now remember, the motto of the Team AP space is, it's not hard, it's new. And if nobody has told you this, I want you to remember, you've got this. Entrepreneurship is hard. I love you, I believe in you, and I am so grateful to be in service of you, whether free or paid. And until next time, stay focused, babes.